Hi, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful episode on the Trustworthy podcast. We're so excited to have a special guest today, Pei Wu, the president of MWBE Unite. Welcome, Pei.
Hello, nice to see you both.
Nice to see you. Excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Pei, we are so excited to learn more about you and the role that trust plays in your life. So I think that's where we should kick it off. Briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and the role that trust has played in your life so far.
So I'm honored to have been asked to kind of contribute to this conversation. Trust is a big part of everybody's life, but in my life in particular, as I kind of reflect on the journey that I've been on, building a company like MWBE Unite really has the foundation is about trust. MWBE Unite is a network platform for diverse suppliers across commercial real estate. We are connecting both individuals and companies that operate across all aspects of different disciplines within the built environment with the notion of advancing diversity. To build a company that is mission driven like this requires trust on all fronts, whether it's at the individual level, between companies, trust between the buyers and the suppliers really is about changing the equation. So I'm happy to be able to share some of that story with you today.
So let me ask you this, because you and I go back like years, I think, which is why I'm so excited that you're here and we stayed connected. My experience with you is around how strong your self-awareness and self-confidence is. I've seen you succeed in many different initiatives and projects and in different ways that you've shown up as a leader in our industry. And now you're doing this. Talk a little bit about how your self-awareness and self-confidence plays into setting up this amazing diversity initiative and what's worked, what hasn't worked. Talk a little bit about how trust has played into the success of MWBE Unite.
It's interesting because our true self takes shape in so many different forms. I'm a first generation immigrant. I am one of the few in my family that operated at the corporate level. I've got folks that are in, small business, people that have been in politics, family members that have been sort of middle management in different, companies. When I look at sort of the journey that I've been on, I appreciate your comment about the self-awareness and self-confidence aspect of it, because it didn't always feel that way, every step of the way. There are moments where as a person, when you come into trust, like the root of that word is true. It is about how do you arrive at different places where you live the truth that you think is what you need to embrace at the moment. That has always led me to a different place. When I get to a place where I know that either the area does not interest me as much or that my contribution in that particular chapter has run its course, I am looking for that next challenge. MWBE Unite is one of those big, hairy industry problems when it comes to diversity. In the industry, I felt that somebody with my background might be able to help contribute to some of the solutioning. I don't know that I can fully address the scope of everything that needs to be done in the industry. In the 2 years that we've been in existence, I have definitely provided some really great examples of how it can work and how suppliers are being engaged to make material impacts and do interesting projects. Susan, I don't know that was a long-winded answer, but I'm not sure I answered your question, but hopefully that gave you a couple of nuggets around how I think about trust.
I think what I'm hearing from your response, Pei, is that you're self-aware enough to understand where you've come from, and not just to leave those experiences behind, but to collect those experiences as part of who you are and how you interact with the rest of the world. And what I love about hearing your personal story is how you've folded it into how you move in your professional world as well. The fact that you have an innate keen interest in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but taking it to be an advocate and to do something about it.
It is also leading with curiosity. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, it is about staying curious and leaning into the unknown. That's what has always kept me interested in sort of looking around the corner. And it's interesting when you talk about experiences. How I started this journey with MWBE Unite was through a Steve Jobs quote, where He talks about the Stanford commencement. He talks about how you can't connect the dots forward. You can only connect them backward. You have to trust that the dots will connect. That is the journey I'm on. I'm trusting that the dots will connect, and they are indeed connecting.
That's incredible. I love that quote. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Susan, I saw
Yeah,
you
yeah.
wanted to respond as well.
We all would love to live in a perfect world that's not perfect. Talk a little bit about when the dots didn't quite connect and the way you showed up didn't quite work for either someone in your ecosystem or one of your colleagues. How did you know? Like, first, how did you know as a human? And then what did you do? What were you able to do about it, if anything?
One of the things that I realized in preparing for this conversation is that trust foundationally has a few different parts to it. In real estate, we always talk about how, we're in a people business, right? We trust people we know, and we work with people we know. And that's also part of the reason why it's so hard to promote other suppliers or people we may not have worked with in the past. The three words that came to mind as I was thinking about this whole trust topic was that really it's about leaning into belief, context, and value alignment. Those three words are so important. Most of the time, we're comfortable with people who believe the same things as we do, who understand contextually where we come from. If you have two people who are immigrants and have very similar lived experiences because they were not born here, right? Value alignment goes beyond like, where was I born and what I believe in, whether it's, religious or cultural. It goes down to, as a person, what are my values? And that's the lived truth that I have, right? And those three things are important to how we show up, both at work and then the projects and the things that we do. And there's not an alignment with somebody, it usually is something to do with those three things not being aligned. It's a misalignment of understanding because we don't understand, if that makes sense.
I'm going to be really honored that you and I have been colleagues and humbled to call you my friend for all these years as well. What did we do, or what did you and Christina do to set up the understanding of that alignment? How do you show up with somebody that you first meet or first do business with so that you can gauge that alignment is there or it's not? So if you could just share a little bit about that, because this is a success story here about alignment.
Christina, why don't we talk a little bit about, you and I have never worked together. I still remember way back when we met each other. I think it had to have been a cornet party, and you had just moved here, and you were getting settled into New York. And as I recall, you were working with a design firm at the time. But there was just something. And I think leaning into a bit around the context, right? We're both sort of innovators in how we think. And I think you see that in each other. And that's where the alignment is, despite the fact that we've never actually worked together.
And our lived experiences as well, in terms of the immigrant story and having to find your footing in a place where you don't have the comfort of family and friends and a community already established. One thing that I noticed about you, Pei, is that you were very open in your conversation, and I felt like you came from a place of abundance. And that for me is really important. And that's why I felt like I can actually build a relationship with this wonderful human being, because you lead from a place of abundance. And that means that we could grow together in relationship.
I love that word, abundance, because there is more than enough to go around. There's that element of the network we're trying to build. It's true example of 1 + 1 can equal 3. Because at the end of the day, the relationships and partnerships that we're putting together to win business on their own, those individuals and companies may or may not actually either bid for that work or win that work. But when they come together, and the power of that combined credential and the creativity and the approach is really what I'm starting to see play out sort of 2 years into it, which is also a learning for me as well, right? Because, it's one thing to like lean into a leap of faith of like, okay, crazy enough to start a new company after 30 years in major corporates. Not only that, to like literally call people up that don't know, that I've never worked with, that don't know me, don't know my background. So many people have been so gracious. I just got off a phone call with somebody that I reached out to on LinkedIn, and we're working on a proposal right now. He's a professor at Columbia University. We'd never met before. He's an expert in one space where I would like to have him be part of the team. That's the context where you come from, where people who are willing to lean into innovative thinking, that are open enough to be inclusive, that are curious enough to want to lean in and do something interesting, right? That is the future. I think it was a survey that came out today that talked about how the Gen Zs actually are opting out of companies where they don't have value alignment in a significant, like more than 50%. That is eye-opening. As we talk about the biggest segment of workforce that is coming into the population, and they have very different values, and they trust the institutions and the corporations that we worked with for so many years in a very different light.
I have a family member who's a Gen Z, and he actually left his job because there was no value alignment. And he tried to travel the world a little bit to find himself, and is now interviewing, and he just got his first job offer. And it was the same issue as the prior company. And he struggled, like, should I take it, not take it? That value alignment is so clear to him. I've actually seen it in action right now with somebody in my family. Another question though about value alignment and any gaps. We know who you are, but how do you create a network and an ecosystem of companies and individuals that have the same values and are in alignment? Like, do you use any tools? Do you use screening? How do you go in this world? I don't know how many companies now in your network, but quite a few. How do you do that and still hold on to those values that you hold so dear, so that people still trust you? Because it's still you in the market, and that's who we all trust. We don't know them, we know you.
I wish I, had a magic tool. Ultimately, trust happens in conversation. I'd lead with the openness, seeking to understand, not only under the nature of their business, but the credentials and the caliber and quality of the work that they've already done in the marketplace, but also understand what's their sweet spot, where they might be able to actually lean into certain services. The biggest differentiator with a lot of what exists out there, whether you're talking about certification or all the company portals that are out there, ultimately what ends up happening is just a bunch of lists. Companies are more than lists, and people build their businesses based on interesting experiences that sometimes you don't see it until you actually get to know them and talk about the experience that they already have. It doesn't jump off a page. But when you start to talk about, well, here's the pursuit that I have, what are the areas that you can play in? Then suddenly they're like, oh, well, I already have a credential in, ABC and XYZ. And they're now suddenly an instrumental part of the credentials that are being brought to the table. So I seek to understand first. And then from there, it's just a matter of, good old project management skills. I think trust can be measured, but I don't know that it can be done any other way but good old sweat equity. So.
There's so much value in storytelling or sonic seasoning. Our ability to kind of spice up our life through sonic seasoning.
Can I steal that?
Oh, take it. That's for everyone. The work that you're doing through your organization, MWBE Unite, is so critically important to increasing diversity, not only of suppliers and helping people to get their foot in the door of an industry of who knows who, but diversity of thought. And so my question is, what comes first? Is diversity or trust?
So trust, I think, is inherently optimistic. Now, when we talk about the three words that I shared before, context, belief, value alignment, at some level, when you first meet somebody, trust is extended in a leap of faith. This person might have come from a referral, from a friend, but then beyond that, there's an element of optimism that whatever you believe to be true will actually play out. And when it plays out, then that's your evidence. Trust comes first, because trust also creates that safe space for people to be creative and be free to share their real authentic thoughts. That's also what a lot of companies are grappling with right now. The cultural safety to actually be who you are, say something without feeling like, oh, I'm going to be judged, or I'm not going to be able to perceived in a way that is going to help me get to the next level. So I personally think trust comes first, but trust with optimism.
I love that. Susan, did you want to jump in here?
What does Paywu do when you're building this whatever it is, whether it's your brand or things in your family or your work or whatever? What do you do when it doesn't work? Because it's bound to happen.
Challenges happen all day, every day. It's part of building a startup business, but it's also part of trying to change the way that people perceive and the way business is done. It's no small feat, right? But business is hard enough as it is. People, want to press the easy button. Things don't work out, whether it's an alliance member decides that they don't want to actively participate, or a conversation with a client has percolated, through a process and then sort of came to an end, right? That happens all the time. The notion that abundance, that there's enough people in the industry that believe in the cause and, in big ways and small ways, make introductions, they sort of highlight opportunities. And I choose to focus on that. That's where trust in self and trust in where I am today comes into play, because there are enough challenges in the industry when we think about, all the stuff that we grapple with and debate around return to office and, will the office ever come back? And the other thing that is, the network that we're building is more than just corporate, right? We have diverse developers. We have people who are operating in sustainability. The abundance word is extremely important here, because what we're doing is not just corporations. It's pretty much any asset people live, work, play, and study is a playing field for us. And so I choose to focus on that. It is a choice because just like trust is a choice, I'm not here to solve the entire equation, but if I know that I can even just help out a little bit, I think we're in a better place than we've been.
Fantastic.
Love that. And I think you brought in the whole idea of choice. And I think that is really, really important, that we can choose at any point in time to react. We're in control of our reactions, and we're in control of what we do about something. We might not be in control about what's going on. So how do we choose to react? And I love that message. So it's trust, choose, and abundance. So if you had one hack that you would like to share with our audience, will help them, what would that be in this whole trust, choice, and abundance space?
So I am somebody who has a high bias for action. My hack would be intent proven by action. To really build trust or extend trust, you have to have the notion of good intent. That intent has to be supported by action. Otherwise, that trust is eroded very quickly. Trust also, has a piece around reliability. Right? Has the person or the organization demonstrated that they are trustworthy, and that shows up in sort of consistency and reliability of how something plays out. That's my trust hack. I show up with good intent, and then we demonstrate with actions why there's value in being part of MWBE Unite.
I've got to ask you, would you say that's the same trust hack that you would recommend for and vendors who are thinking about, what's it going to take for me to partner with other suppliers or vendors, or with an organization like MWBE Unite?
I would say yes, it is still very applicable, and here's why. I think that collectively as an industry, the last 2 years, there's been a lot of conversation about how do we actually make it work. I think many big organizations go down the path of if we build it, they will come. And yet, all of us, the reason why trust is extended only to a subset as opposed to everybody is that there's a finite amount of resources, time, and energy. So whether you're talking about an organization, capital deployment, or individual, you only have so many hours in a day. Choices where we spend our time and who we interact with, and these smaller companies have probably 10 times the issue around that, because as a small company, you don't have as many resources. You don't have the luxury of being able to chase every Fortune 100 out there to answer that 100 questionnaires in 99 different formats. And so for the diverse suppliers, they do also have to figure out how to trust in the process and trust in the fact that there are companies out there that are interested in mentoring and coaching and getting to a different place. But that engagement is not always direct. There are plenty of diverse suppliers that opt out because they don't trust the process anymore, because they've been asked to bid many times and actually have not won any work. And so trust goes both ways. Just because you're building it as a big entity doesn't mean that they will come. And you see that both, in companies as well as the public sector. And so I think that's also part of the reason why the intent proven by action. When we have alliance members that have won work with us, when we call, they pick up the phone. And where there's an opportunity, they have a real material conversation around, do we want to do this? Can we do this? Do we want to be part of it? And that's not a conversation that always happens in every instant. So the trust factor is there because it's, I like to think that 30 years of, industry experience, I know that, I do have a lot of relationships that over time I've built some trust with, but bringing the diverse suppliers along and extending that trust as part of the network is really, there's power in that. And that doesn't exist before we built the platform. So excited to, sort of see where this takes us. And I'm so excited for this partnership with you guys as well, because the TrustWorthy platform that you're building is amazing.
Thank you. Love fest.
I know, there's so much love in the room. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today, because not only have you touched on topics of trust with contractors and vendors and suppliers, but also at a personal level. And I think it's great to see the broad spectrum from personal self-awareness, trusting yourself, carrying that into relationships and then with wider teams and organizations. And I can see that follow through in your interactions. And that's why you've been so successful and you've got such a wonderful network. So we wish you all the best. We can't wait to continue to see and support you continue to grow and thrive. We're happy to be a part of the journey. And thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pei.
Thank you. Great conversation. I really look forward to seeing you both in person at some point.
Can't wait.